Hello, and thank you for showing here. So we will be, as you can see in the program, we'll be talking about the effect of global crisis on the global LGBT plus rights. First, I want to introduce myself. My name is Abir, and I work with LGBT plus Denmark as a project manager, working mainly with our North Africa program that has projects in both Tunisia and Morocco. And I pass to my colleague, Nicole.
Yes, hello, my name is Nicole, and I also work with LGBT Denmark, and I work with our East Africa program, where we have projects in Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, and Kenya.
And we have a guest with us here today. We are happy to have Sarah with us, who is from Globale Focus as the policy advisor on civic space and human rights. Sarah, you can.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very honored to get this invitation. My name is Sarah Brandt, and I work for Global Focus. And LGBT plus Denmark is a member. We are a member organization for all of the Danish organizations working globally. So all of the Danish organizations working globally on human rights, development, cooperation, humanitarian aid, etc. are all members of us. And if you just see an overview here, these are some of the organizations we have as members. We're around 80 at the moment. And we try to work for the common interests of our members. And since I focus on civic space and human rights, I try to collaborate with our members about how we can get better at supporting partners around the world that are in danger, that are facing issues that are really important to address. And at the same time, we also advise the Danish Foreign Ministry on how they can better address some of these issues. So today, I was invited to speak about civic space, and civic space is a bit of a fluffy term, but basically what we mean is it possible to say your opinion, to work for what you believe in, to take part in an organization that works for whatever interest you have around the world? And as you can see on this map, the answer is broadly no. Unfortunately, at the moment, we only have around 3% of the world's population living in countries where they enjoy democratic freedoms. And so when we say that, we mean freedoms of expression, freedom of association, and freedom of a peaceful assembly. And so this map here is taken from the Civicus Monitor, which is a monitoring website looking at the situation for democracy, but in particular these three freedoms around the world. And obviously this is something that affects the LGBTIQ plus community a lot. I think they are actually at the forefront of this fight, because it's not new that LGBTQI plus people have not been wanted in many societies, and organizations have especially not been wanted. And so I think the general civil society can really learn a lot from that struggle. And I also just want to remind you how privileged we are that we can sit here today and actually have an event on this topic, which is not a given in most of the world. But basically what this map shows you is that if the color of a country is red, it means that it's completely closed off. It's impossible for civil society to do any work. It's impossible for you as a normal citizen to speak out. And it's impossible to be who you want to be and say whatever interest you have. And then we have on the opposite spectrum the open societies, the dark green ones. And as you can see, Denmark is one of those. But as you can also see, there are very few in the world. And then it basically goes from there to light green, yellow, orange, and then red for completely closed off societies. Unfortunately, LGBTIQ plus organizations and activists are not only suffering in those countries that are red on the map here. They're also suffering in orange, yellow, and even some light green countries as well, really being in the forefront of this issue. But what are we actually talking about? And I want to now just show you 3 examples of what we mean when we talk about these three freedoms. So first of all, we have the freedom of association. In Denmark, you can register as an organization with whatever interest you have, and you're also able to operate, you're able to have the members you want, and you're able to receive funding. But in many other places, funding is, for example, restricted. In some countries, if you receive foreign funding, you can be tried as a terrorist because you might be working against public interests with these activities that you're receiving funding for as an association. And as many of you also know, in a country like Uganda, the organization Sexual Minorities Uganda has for a long time been fighting with the government and in the courts to just be able to have their own organization registered. So really, us being able to register an organization in Denmark, that is quite a privilege as well. And then we have the freedom of assembly. And as you know, we have all faced restrictions to assemblies during COVID-19. But at least in Denmark, during COVID, we were able to have peaceful protests. That was not a ban. We had an assembly ban, but we didn't have a protest ban. And this is very important because it is a constitutional right to come together in squares or wherever you want to have your peaceful protest, to speak your mind. And this was something that unfortunately during COVID-19 was banned in many countries. But in a little bit we will get back to what has actually been the impact on COVID-19 on this situation globally. And I just want to say that some of the ways that freedom of assembly is being restricted globally is that you will not be able to register a peaceful protest. You will not be allowed to protest. There will be many times a law that actually bans protests. But then also in some countries you might be able to have your protest registered or not, but then you will face violent attacks from the police with tear gas, rubber bullets, maybe even live ammunition, and of course arrests is also very common. But we do also see peaceful protesters around the world being killed just for taking part in protests. And then the last one is freedom of expression, and it's important to say that this is not only an issue with us speaking together here, speaking freely, saying whatever we want. It's also an issue when you write something. It's an issue when you say something online. There are countries where people have made a tweet and they're actually sent to prison for 15 years for that tweet. And for that reason, freedom of expression is something that should not only be looked at as something physical, something you say, something you write, but also something you do online. And more we see governments around the world closing down websites, skimming the internet to find people who say things that are unpopular. The so-called peaceful voices of dissent, those that dare to challenge the normal or what is okay to say in a society. And for that reason, some governments try to close down internet sites, but they would also arrest someone for making a post online as well, or for writing something. Of course, journalists are also very much persecuted for speaking up in an article, on TV, in the radio, etc. And another way of also expressing yourself is also what you look like, right? So it's not only what you say, what you write, it's also how you look. And in some countries, it is not even okay to for example, wear a rainbow-colored item, etc. So those are important things to keep in mind. And so those were the three major freedoms that are monitored under civic space and unfortunately are not being respected in most countries around the world. But if we look a little bit further into what it actually means in general, what we can see is that laws are being used more and more as a tool against activism. And unfortunately what we see is that governments learn from each other. You will have one government posing a very restrictive law, and if there's not a lot of backlash at the UN or other governments criticizing this law, many others will do the same. And it's almost the new normal among governments around the world. They're even fighting for their right within the UN system to be able to pass these laws and blame it on fighting terrorism, blame it on fighting corruption. During COVID-19, it was very much fighting misinformation and false news. But some that we see is also the tight control of public space. So as I said, in some countries it's not possible to come together and protest. There might be a law that actually says that it's impossible. And in some countries you're able to protest if you support the government, but not if you're against it. So there are those double standards as well. But then we also see the criminalization of activists in many countries where basically fighting for what you believe in, whether it being in an organization or online or wherever your activism may be, is being criminalized. And some places they even put you in a military court, and that's very serious because being in a military court means that you are tried as a terrorist or somebody who is damaging the security of the state, and that can lead to life in prison and in some places even the death penalty. And then we also have these extra legal tactics, so those things that cannot be written down in law and that there's really no excuse for. But what we're seeing is that more and more, those that speak out are being vilified in the news, in public spaces, etc. So activists are increasingly facing what we call defamation campaigns, and they can accuse you of anything, right? So for example, in Egypt, during the revolution back in 2011, those female activists that were on the square were called prostitutes in the media because they were sleeping there next to men, and that was unacceptable. And so that's just one example of how governments or state-owned media will use any excuse to vilify someone that is not of any interest for them to support. Then we also see unwarranted surveillance. And this can happen in ways where it targets a single activist. So if, for example, someone is really speaking out and being very successful, getting a lot of support, mobilizing many people that agree, everything that that person does on their phone, online, etc., is being surveilled. And so in some countries it's impossible to say what you think on WhatsApp, on Skype, on text messages, and on the phone when you speak on the phone. And so we have apps that are encrypting the messages, but in some countries they even stop those apps from working. There was a case where a government shut down Signal, which is one of these apps, but then Signal has been very smart in making their system close to Google. So what happened was that the entire Google website also shut down, and so then they had to, of course, get it back up. Then we also see intimidation and violence, and unfortunately there are also many killings of human rights defenders around the world every year. And those are especially the ones fighting for things that are very unpopular. Actually, those that are facing the most killings are environmental rights, land rights, and indigenous people and climate rights activists, because it's not only the government they have against them, they also have big corporations against them. So, so that's very, very dangerous to be a climate activist, for example, in many parts of the world. It's important to mention these intersectionalities that also apply, because if you have this general image of the situation, and if you're a white male human rights defender, yes, you face attacks, but if any other tag applies to you, whether it's your gender, sexuality, race, you may be part of an indigenous population or anything else, you face even extra layers of restrictions. And this is also my experience. I used to work in Egypt for a local gender equality organization, and we were working on issues such as domestic violence, legal assistance for survivors, etc. But quickly we were forced to stop that work and actually start working entirely on trying to get our manager to not go to prison, and also to ensure that we could still continue our activities. At the moment in Egypt, if you want to make a project, for example, with a Danish organization, it will not be approved. And the government says, yes, we will approve it, but then it takes years and years and years, and in the end, DANIDA or other funding goes away because basically they cannot wait. But what happened was that I witnessed the killing of a protester in Cairo, and I was there together with my manager, and it was a peaceful protest, and the police just started firing live ammunition on them, and this woman, Shamel Sabah, she was killed right in front of our eyes. And Azza, my manager, went to the public prosecutor to tell her story, to say I witnessed the police kill a peaceful protester. And what happened was that she was then accused of attacking police and taking part in a peaceful protest. And so all of a sudden, the witness was the accused. And from a lot of support from international organizations and allies around the world and people writing petitions, etc., she was finally acquitted. But unfortunately now, Asa is risking life in prison for receiving funding for activities against national interest. And then also another charge, which is very interesting, and it is that she is liberating women irresponsibly. So those are the kind of charges that governments actually use seriously to target women, human rights defenders, and others. So recently we had a campaign together with LGBT plus Denmark and other of our members where we focused on the increasing attacks that happened during COVID. And what we saw was that governments were using the crisis to crack down at an even higher extent on those people that they didn't want to speak up in society. And so we basically had governments saying, oh, because of COVID, we cannot allow for people to speak up anymore. We cannot allow for freedom of expression to take place because false news might take place. And so in Honduras, which is a country that is restricted, as you can see, because it's orange, they declared a state of emergency, but it actually suspended the rights to freedom of expression and also peaceful assembly. So in Honduras, you were not able to have a peaceful protest like you would have been able to in Denmark during COVID, even though we had the assembly ban. And in Egypt, as I already spoke a bit about, it's a red country, it's completely closed, it's impossible to speak up, it's impossible to work for anything you believe in, at least publicly. We do have really brave people there still working underground. But they decided to arrest several doctors who were criticizing the Egyptian government for their response to COVID. And in Uganda, we saw that they used the opportunity to crack down on the LGBTIQ community to actually accuse them of spreading COVID. And so this was, of course, insane, but they saw a window of opportunity to use the crisis to crack down on people that they weren't interested in allowing to be in society. Basically, they were arrested from a shelter where they were, and so this was also an issue of homelessness and a lot of other things because these shelters just weren't safe spaces anymore. I think that was it for me, and yeah, I hear that you can ask questions later, so thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for setting the scene. As what we wanted by this presentation mainly is to look at the world generally, and that human rights activists are being targeted all over the world, and this crisis have added on that targeting. That's what you explained as well, is that in the last months we had a rise in shrinking civic space, and this is not only for LGBT plus activists, but it's all over the world. And the next part of our presentation will be mainly focus on how this general effect affected especially the LGBT plus community and activists with focus on countries where we do actually work. So it will be mainly about Tunisia, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and Rwanda. We will be presenting a video that Nicole will be presenting it a bit before showing it.
Yes. So usually what we would do is we would invite our partners, of course, so that they can tell you themselves how they have been feeling the COVID-19 effects in their countries. But obviously that's not possible. So we decided to put together a video where all of them have recorded basically themselves talking about 3 different things. One, the effects of COVID-19, and then also the responses that they as organizations and activists gave to their communities, and then lastly, opportunities or the way forward in the future, knowing that COVID-19 and the effects of COVID-19 will still stay with us for a while. Those videos will show partners from all of the countries that we work in. And we work actually with many more organizations than we have been able to get videos from, because we also face, of course, the challenge of very bad internet connections. So we haven't even been able to receive all the responses. But if we could play the first video, please.
This was one of the periods I feel I'd never been prepared for. It was mentally straining. I never felt hopeless. If I were staying alone during that time, I don't know what my mental status would have been, especially the first month. The scare all over the news, social media, it was really unbearable.
And most of us depend on the informal sector, which at this period, it is the most affected sector, and closure of so many businesses, closure of so many activities have rendered most of the young people out here just to sit at home and be unable to think of what next to do.
I think the primary thing to mention is that COVID-19 and the lockdown that came along with it obliged members of the community, including myself, to be locked with families that are not necessarily accepting or tolerant. And many of them are violent and extreme in their behavior with queer people. So when it comes to mental well-being, I think being locked with our queerphobic families, it affected me in the way that I felt isolated. I felt like there was not much space to express myself and to be who I actually am.
Others have problems with supplies and finding money to buy food and necessities and to manage to protect themselves. The most affected communities by COVID-19 in Tunisia, I would say, are the trans communities and the sex workers.
The support I think people need is access to health. The health facilities were, when the COVID-19 restrictions came in, accessing the health facilities became a bit harder. When I speak from personal experience as a trans man, if I'm to stand outside the gate and I face my discrimination right from there outside the gate, I don't know how long it will take me before I run away. Usually when you go to a health facility that where you're very sure you're going to get stigma, you're like, okay, I need this, I give myself 40 minutes and then I'll be out.
We need food more, we need more rent, we need that more than we need the care packages. Someone would even say, like, are we going to eat the care package? Weirdly enough, there was a silver lining to all this. I just had my baby in February, and normally I would be traveling left, right, and center for work and going, like, I would have to go back to work very, very soon. But then there was no movement anymore, so I had to stay at home. And that gave me an advantage because then I will take care of my baby. So she was like sort of part of my coping mechanism because I was busy being a new mom and trying to figure things out. And then I think I was out there being out being there for other people because I'm a counselor. So that sort of like gave me a lot of healing and a lot of joy in my heart because I was helping other people.
We can stop the video for now. So as you've heard, a lot of the impact that our partners have mentioned is especially the mental well-being of people, the worries and insecurities of what the future will bring. There was a loss of income. For a lot of people it was as well evictions and therefore homelessness. There was queerphobic families, neighbors, friends, lack of access to food. Something as simple as even having 3 meals a day was basically impossible for a lot of our members, and also supplies such as masks and hand sanitizers or even soap or clean water to wash your hands. Access to health and the discrimination that they felt during health services. And for us, what we would like to put focus on right now is also how the way the COVID-19 has impacted our partners, how it then also impacted us. Because we are a development organization and we don't usually provide humanitarian aid. And we felt a little bit helpless knowing how do we respond to this? We know that our partners are struggling with people who are going hungry and who are not able to access health services and even get tested if they fear that they do have COVID-19. And we didn't even know what we could do. We had a case in Kenya where someone feared to be infected with COVID-19, and they contacted the health services and were told to wait, they would be contacted. And they waited for a whole week and were still not contacted, which meant that they isolated themselves. And it resulted in them actually being without food for the entire week, because in the same time it happened to rain heavily, so people couldn't come out and even help them with just basic food. And for us, we kind of felt stuck between a rock and a hard place, because on the one hand we have our donor requirements. I mean, we need to live up to the theory of change and all the work plans that we have made, that we have said we would do, and in the same time we have people that are literally starving and are evicted and are being arrested and are being left by themselves, and there's no one to care for them. In the same time, I also want to say that, of course, we had donors that were very flexible. Some of our donors, we work, for example, with CISU and with the Obel Foundation, who were incredibly flexible in this regard. And I know, Abir, your experience was quite different on this.
Yeah, I can see, I know you're laughing, but yeah, because in one way we had to cancel activities as you have COVID-19 lockdown, so our partner organization had to lock down their safe spaces for queer community. And here I'm mainly talking about Tunisia, where we usually have regular activities, and we actually had a queer film festival planned for March that had to be cancelled. And then all of a sudden, all these people who used to come to the safe space and so on had nowhere else to go but be stuck wherever their families are. And when their families happened to throw them out, they had no income anymore. So we needed to adjust, like we can do workshops. We can use that money for something else. And then, for example, the donor for our project in Tunisia and Morocco is the Danish Arab Partnership, who wouldn't like to transfer money from activities to actually handing food or paying for people's shelter or even a doctor, because the North African region is a middle income country where we are not supposed to do such things, which is sometimes not very understandable, knowing the condition that LGBT plus people are living under in these countries where just being LGBT is being criminalized. So yeah. I don't know, Sarah, if you have something to add.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add that unfortunately the lack of access to health is also being increased in countries that are very closed with regards to civic space, because of NGOs that provide this really important service, especially to the LGBTIQ plus community, and they're not able to operate. then it's basically impossible to find any place to get health, even to access health, even in a pandemic.
Could we please play the second part of the video?
There are a lot to do. So I personally helped where I could help a person, but through organizations which I am working with, we initiated some solutions to ensure we are responding to the consequences of the COVID-19 to the community level. That was to respond by providing humanitarian assistance to the community, like providing protection gears, providing food.
We had to provide a lot of, assistance with regards to psychological counseling, with regards to giving basic counseling and also engaging our members online. Because we realized that this was very important to have a support system that can really be there for the LGBTIQ community who are going through distress.
We're able to support shelters for 3 groups, provided bicycles and motorcycles for some groups, support their access to medication, sewing machines to make masks for the community and sell some to the medical community so as they could earn a living and support their income. We were able to do some food relief to some people. We have facilitated some counselors so as to have to scale up the intake of counseling. We have met rent contributions for some of the people that are in dismay. Really have done a lot for people.
So as an organization, the first thing that we did was keep on checking on each other and to maintain the mental health of the staff members and community members so that we could continue our work healthily in this whole mess. We tried to create new schedules adapted to the new circumstances, regular online meetings where we could keep on checking on each other and keep the projects going, and even be more creative and find new project ideas that suit the whole situation.
We actually managed to get some funds specific to COVID-19 and provide urgent help to people from the communities, like necessities like helping in paying rent, providing assistance to buy supplies, to buy food and cleaning products. We also changed our activities to take place online, making sure to use safe platforms for the purpose, proposing different activities to keep people engaged and to have them spend their time with the community.
But we also encouraged other people that were actually working or advocating for LGBTI rights, other organizations that are working on human rights, also to respond and to do something to see how we could together join effort and we support our people in these times of COVID-19.
We saved lives of people who would have gone hungry. We have catered for their mental well-being. We have catered for the mental well-being of another person. You have put hope. You have shown people there is hope after this. So I think, though most people would argue that to create dependency and the issues of sustainability, I think now that doesn't matter. What matters now is saving a human being.
Humanitarian aid is awesome because you get help. You can offer people help right here, right now, this very moment. There's a crisis, you come with solution, there, bam, you give them. But then on the flip side, it develops a lot of dependency because I am out of work, or COVID-19, for example, affected a lot of people in different ways. So when you come with that sort of aid, you help people there, and they're fine, they feel happy, but then they also know that you are going to help them, so they don't go out there and find other solutions, or like develop or build resilience to the problems, or like they don't build more resilience as they should have, or find better solutions to the current issues. Instead, they just sit back and develop dependency. I'm not saying that this is what happens 100% of the time, but then we risk it every time we do that, because when we start giving food relief, for example, it's a happy thing, people are happy, but then the next minute is they're like, where is the food for this month? And if you're not able to provide that, then there's a problem.
Please stop the video for a second. I think. Okay. So the first thing that we notice from the COVID-19 pandemic, it is that the people that we work with, they are super amazing. They have so much strength in them, and often it doesn't really come across except when we are in a situation of crisis. And this really has shown this. So as I've said in the beginning, like some of our friends couldn't send their videos because they didn't even have a stable internet connection. But despite all this, they were still able to move a lot of the activities online, and were able to check on their community members and check on their friends to make sure that they are fine and that they are helped if they do need help. We also managed to do a lot of humanitarian, or they, not me, they managed to do a lot of humanitarian aid. But a lot of the aid that they did was actually with a focus of sustainability. So as you've said, like some of them have mentioned that they got sewing machines and bicycles and things like that, and shelters. And all those things, we have started in Uganda a soap making business. We have we have given bicycles and motorcycles, and there's now a delivery service. We have started given sewing machines to basically all our partners who have started income generating activities in tailoring. So all these activities that they have done during COVID-19 were to help people right now, right here, but in the same time it also has a future aspect to it, which was quite impressive to see as well. In the same time, however, there is, right now we know that there's like this hunger for human interaction. People really, I mean, if we listen to what Sarah said in the beginning, shrinking space for LGBT people, that is something that is literally
I was out there, being there for other people because I'm a counselor.
Can we just...
So that sort of like gave me a lot of healing and a lot of joy in my heart because I was...
Sorry. So a lot of our people, they are facing these things not only in society, but they face that in their families every single day. So when we had a lot of online activities, a lot of our members couldn't even participate because they were in places where they were not safe. So they couldn't attend a Zoom call or a webinar or even a WhatsApp call, a group call. But in the same time, if people don't even have food, they also don't have data to even pay for the internet to be able to join those convenings.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole, for that. And one thing I want to add is that what one of the speakers was talking about the dependency on humanitarian aid. Like, we had to do a lot of handing out food to people and like sanitary products and cleaning products and so on. But then the question was, what when the crisis end? Because there is a lot of challenges on getting a job as an LGBT plus person in many of the countries we work with due to discrimination and so on. But at the same time, you find yourself in the situation of COVID-19 obliged to do that. As one of the speakers said, it's like people ask, am I supposed to eat a care package? Because people don't have food. And when you ask them, yeah, but we have this activity online, it's not the priority for them right there. So we really found ourselves also as a development organization, and the challenge is like how you deal with this. How can you propose activities for building capacity and raising awareness about LGBT plus human rights, and the same time where you are letting your community down? It's almost like letting the LGBT plus community down when you know big percentage of the community in that situation are actually sleeping hungry or are in danger of being killed by their families. It was a serious challenge for us, and I think we are still struggling to find the right balance on between the whole human rights way of focusing on the LGBT plus rights and the direct support for the community. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, no, we heard also in the video that that partners had also become more creative in the way that they had to still keep working, and we have also seen that globally, especially with regards to protest movements. You might remember how we've had big protest movements around the world last year and this year, and luckily in some places people were still able to protest from their cars, from signs, etc. In Poland, they thought the government, they thought they were very smart when they decided to try and pass an anti-abortion legislation that hadn't been approved in the population previously because of big protests. So they thought they could just do it during COVID when there was an assembly ban. But they managed to protest from cars, in queues, with signs, etc. So people have had to find creative ways to continue their activism.
Can we start the video again? Thanks.
Well, if this pandemic showed us something, it is the importance of solidarity and working together when facing different issues. We managed to cooperate with different organizations in Tunisia, and this helped us to be able to cover as many regions as possible and have easy access to the different communities. It was honestly really, really good experience strategizing with others, and I personally see this as the only way to move forward towards our rights and our existence in the country.
I would say the COVID-19 impact was, of course, not just negative. It did bring opportunities. And at first it was hard to fundraise, but now we can fundraise. We can fundraise and actually get something, because the entire world is in a crisis and people are responding to crisis.
I would say COVID-19 situation or pandemic has broadened the scope of our operation. It has broadened the approaches and better strategies in handling situations that negatively or positively impact the communities. COVID-19 has also given us a learning experience and best practices in form of, handling or managing a crisis in a level that meaningfully involves the community. So that's, and I feel as an organization or as an organizing, it is very, very important for us to learn from these processes for a better future in case such a situation arises again.
Can we check on people? How can we offer support? How can we be there for others? How can we even have a counseling session without having a face-to-face meeting? And we have been doing that, so I think that is amazing. And for my organization, as I said, first of all, we had the chance to register. Second, we formed all these alliances and partnerships in East Africa with other organizations. Like, there's just been a lot of partnerships and synergy in East Africa. And I feel really happy about that because we had all the time to strategize and think about what are the things we want to do together. How can we supplement each other's efforts? What can we learn from what other people are doing in different countries? And I think that has been really beautiful.
Maybe it has given us an experience of working in other environment that we couldn't, and we manage like working more through virtually system and not physically, like keeping ourselves in the house and become more economically budgetic, but also to learn more.
Marginalized communities, the indigenous ethnic groups or tribes that are easily left out in the process of providing humanitarian aid. It is the purpose of now the human rights organization to voice out the concerns of the voiceless or the concerns of those who are left behind in this particular process.
Just keep on. We've always known we are minorities. We've always known we have to take care of each other. We just need to keep doing that and keep doing it the right way, a way that is very much sustainable. The pandemic was very scary for the entire world. The LGBT movement in Uganda needs to contribute.
I believe in people's abilities, and truth is, we underestimate people. We think they are very weak, but there's a lot of strength in us, like the LGBT movement or community. We have gone through so much stuff all through our lives. We've been outed, we have been discriminated against. Like, there's so much stuff that has happened to us that we are just so strong, and most of the time more strong than we think we are. So this is one more time where we need to bring our energy and our strength and join hands and be there for each other. And remember that there's always an advantage to working together rather than apart. So if we support each other, we learn from each other, we listen to each other, we be there for each other, I believe we are going to get through this.
We actually don't have comments after this because our partners said it just in the most beautiful way, the resilience that they have. So from here, we would just like to invite you for questions or comments if you have.
Thanks. Okay, to begin with, first of all, that last part was insanely inspiring and beautiful. And I mean, if you can communicate this from, to your different partners, it was seriously beautiful to listen to them, all of them. I have an issue with the way that we're using the money right now, and it's something that you mentioned before. And I guess it's a question about how are you guys and how can we, like the different organizations in countries like Denmark, how can we push to our providers, the foundations that are giving us money that was supposed to be for something else? How can we push for that money to go into what is actually needed right now? Because we're not in a place where we are, supposed to be organizing parties or social events. I mean, that's important too. We need mental health, but we need to pay rent and we need to feed people. And I mean, we are getting money. It's just that money is not supposed to go there, which I find extremely frustrating. So from your experience, how can we push into that direction?
Thank you so much for that question. I think one of the ways that we have started working with this right now is to start income-generating activities in the countries. So right now we have several projects that we have out there, and fingers crossed that we will get them, where we are starting to educate people in financial literacy and entrepreneurship, so that and also startup capital to start actually small-scale businesses, so that they can support themselves much rather than to be dependent on organizations or on projects or on humanitarian aid from one way or the other. And we actually think that literally, like Pinky was saying in the video, how everyone is so strong and has so much resilience in them. That's what we also believe, and we think that that's the absolute best way forward.
I also want to add the part on the donors and so on. I think that showed us like new learning processes. I mean, we were seeking new donors that we are not normally working with, who are usually supporting humanitarian work. And also we have been creative with our partners on gathering LGBT plus community to donate for LGBT plus community directly, rather than relying on big institutions, but also trying to support them in writing their own applications to the support classic emergency kind of funding. And maybe finally there is some advocacy and lobbying work that is also done in coalitions, and I think that's maybe Sarah, you want to say something on that, because there is some work done on that perspective.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think it's such a great question, because this was really what was needed around the world. We couldn't just send the usual money for activities. It was something completely different that was needed. So what we did in Global Focus together with our members was to look at what are actually the issues that partners face around the world, and then we started speaking with the politicians, especially those working on development cooperation. And we had also been in dialogue with the government directly, with the ministry, but what turned out to be most useful was the dialogue with the politicians, because they then came with a COVID-19 help package for development and humanitarian aid that allowed us to respond to some of these COVID-19 related issues. So that was a great learning experience for us, and of course also a really important win for the sector, but especially for the partners that are the ones the money will go to.
We are still open for questions if there is somebody who has any question.
Hi, my name is Cecilia. I come from the Danish AIDS Foundation. I have a question, comment. Of course, we are very concerned with the health crisis and also the situation where LGBT plus people living with HIV haven't got access to the medication or their like PrEP or condoms, because we all know that sex will happen even under a lockdown. So we are very afraid that years of progress will be lost, or we will go back like 10, 20 years, and then we will have a lot of years rebuilding this. We are starting a new program very soon, and we are concerned that we will have to go back and in some sense start over. I don't know if this is an experience that you have. Of course, we hear your partners, so say like you found new opportunities, you're strong, we know we can work in different ways, but still this is a concern that I have also, as it's a global health crisis with pressure on the health system and so on. Is that an experience that you also share?
So again, thank you for your question. So LGBT Denmark works not so much on health in general, but we work on mental health. And this is exactly the same worry that we share, because a lot of the work that we've done, we have worked in Tanzania since 2014 on mental well-being, and then also we moved towards the other countries. And everything, we feel that everything that we have done so far in helping people to understand themselves and accept themselves as LGBTQ plus people in a society that discriminates them, to maybe also find ways and give them tools to how to maneuver in the society and in their families and so on. All this now is irrelevant if you can't even eat. So right now we know that a lot of those things that we have worked towards for a long time is now something that we worry about how do we come out on the other side of it. So we, of course, are still continuing with the same kind of activities. We have tried to do them online, and we will start up again in smaller groups. But we know that we sort of have to take like these 5 step backs, not even just 1 step, but like probably 5 step backs and start again at that point.
I just wanted to add something on the, again, as Nicole said, we don't focus so much on the health part in our work, but one thing we got from our partners lately is there is such a shortage. Something like condoms in countries like Lebanon now, the whole country is out of condoms, which is very serious, where you have like HIV and key population organizations can hand out condoms. In Tunisia, they were out of PrEP in over the last year or so, because that's not the priority. The country is under economic crisis. That's the first thing that is cut. So even though we don't work directly on that, that's something we know our partners are needing, and we try to support them with finding partners who can support them on that. But there is many steps back when it comes to health providing. So yeah, thank you for raising that up.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a really good analysis, and also from my perspective, what is so damaging is that this is a crisis on so many levels. It's health, it's democracy, it's, you know, it's so many different aspects, and so for that reason, if there are no NGOs to at least provide a little bit of health access that might have been possible in the past, and they're not able to operate anymore, it's impossible to then go from there. What we have seen, however, is that we've seen many actors come together who actually want to help in a new way. You've all heard the slogan from the UN, Build Back Better, to basically use this crisis as a momentum to say, let's not do business as usual, let's do systemic change, let's do some things that actually really make a difference. And I think this is a momentum that we should all come together around, and what we tried to do in Global Focus was that we invited different actors to talk about health, climate, democracy, all of these different aspects, gender equality, etc. And they came up with some systemic change solutions and suggestions. And I think that was helpful in the sense that you had actors that actually have a lot of money or resources. In the health workshop, we had many health companies that were really, really keen to go in and take responsibility and do things differently. So let's hope that we can build back better, at least.
Don't know if there is other questions in the room. Do you have something to add, any of you?
Well, I just want to add that I think this help package that came out of the political agreement that we referred to before, it actually provides a lot of opportunities for organizations to work with their partners around the world who have been affected by COVID. And so I would just like to encourage you to go to CISO's website to see what they are. There is one also specifically looking at those that have faced civic space attacks, but of course there are also a lot of other situations to address. So know that there is support and that it can be found there.
Yeah, and I would just like to thank all of you for having been here, and yeah, have a good Pride.
And I just want to thank also all our partners, just because we send the live streaming for them, so I just want to say thank you for them, and really they were amazing. We sent them a long list with questions. We got so many videos. We managed to put them together, and they really struggled with the internet. We had people having 3 days uploading a video, so that is amazing. And also all their creativity and how they managed this crisis. We saw things that we could never have imagined to happen when you are not supposed to see each other physically, on moving online, on being so creative. So I want to thank them. And have a good Pride.
Thank you.